This is Empty the Bench with Tom Albano.
All these fighters, they're willing to take punches to the head, slams to the ground, but they're scared of a little penny needle.
Nick Morgasen.
Major League Baseball keeps extending his administrative leave out and out and out into the future. Major League Baseball knows something. Rob Manfred knows something. And for him to keep extending administrative leave and not to say why, that's a problem.
And Nick Fodera.
If you did not know this, if you honest to God, and to Jesus did not know, then you are probably as more incompetent than Roger friggin' Goodell here.
Empty the Bench starts now.
Not only does he suck my ass, he sucks your ass, but he sucks everybody else's ass, too.
Well, welcome to episode 99 of Empty the Bench, off the heels of that comment, which I'm sure will be part of the Empty the Bench lore forever and ever and ever and ever. I'm Tom Albano, along with Nick Fodera and Nick Morgasen. Gentlemen, I can see the shit fell apart without me again last week.
A little bit.
Well, when Trevor Bauer news decides to break right before episode 98, when we were going to have such a calm episode, and then Trevor Bauer and the nonsense breaks. And by the way, we're going to get to that right at the top of the episode here.
Yep. So we actually have, for what feels like the first time in a long time, a special guest who will be joining us to discuss this Trevor Bauer situation that you guys, we've talked about it for weeks, but kind of went in a whole other direction as news broke last week, right before you two went on the air. But anyways, we're going to have Michael Duarte, an award-winning journalist over in Los Angeles for NBC, covering all the sports teams over there, like the Dodgers, the Lakers, the Rams. He'll be joining us to discuss all these issues now with the Trevor Bauer case. For those of you who've been sleeping under a rock for the Trevor Bauer case, I haven't heard what's been going on. A judge very recently has come down on the ruling of the potential restraining order, and it has been denied. Well, now let me clarify that does not exonerate him from any potential charges. The criminal investigation itself is still undergoing. It's still being investigated by the LAPD. But the woman who was accusing him has been denied the restraining order. And Michael gets into this a lot. This is not even a full interview. He was so detailed with myself and Nick Fodera.
Right. And I think it was close to a 40-minute interview. You're going to hear about 20 minutes of it. And when I went back and I watched the interview beforehand because I wanted to see it, I couldn't believe how specific he got into some things that, because we all, Nick and I, especially because we covered it over the last episode, we looked into this case a lot. We broke it down piece by piece. And the other part of that situation with the restraining order, that the woman asked for a 5-year restraining order, which got turned away due to what the judge was referring to as not, if they're not going to have sex, why do they need to have a consent restraint put on? So it was weird in that regard how this case came to be, what they decided, and I guess you'll just see what he says, because this was really informative.
Yeah, so all the details that he's talked about, it's not your typical sports interview because there's a lot of legalese in there. It's a lot of breaking down what the judge ruled, even a breakdown of the consent, what exactly consent is over in California, and all the details, and just, how this is going to affect Trevor Bauer on the field, how it's going to affect him off the field. Michael and Nick, hopefully you will agree with this. He covered it from just about every angle you can cover it. You won't even hear much of me and Nick, because all the questions that we planned, he was just going.
They were flying out the window because it was like,
well,
and he wasn't even rambling. He went through it. He almost like he was reading off a list of everything he wanted to speak to. So he was very, very good at this.
And what you guys mean is that he was very informative.
Very informative.
Very detailed, breaking down everything. It was like he had a recipe book, and it was like breaking down inch by inch how to create something
Which is really good when you have somebody who's that informed about this case, because it's very, I mean, as you'll see in the interview, it's very thorny from a legal perspective, and to have everybody break it down is certainly helpful to help us really understand the case and get the layman to understand the case.
Right. And we're going to get to the interview in a second. I just, excuse me, just so people understand what else is coming up with today's episode in case they don't hear. So we're going to cover the MLB situation with the new salary floor. Steve Cohen apparently rips the Mets on Twitter. Deshaun Watson and the FBI are now involved. Tigers broadcaster Jack Morris and more racial remarks against Shohei Ohtani. We'll get to that. And your favorite owner, your favorite team decides to say that taunting is not allowed in the NFL. We'll get to that. We start our NFL previews.
We're going to break down all the AFC teams this week.
And there's a special surprise at the end, which I'm not going to say now. But I have something a little planned at the end. All right, so let's get to Michael Duarte of NBC LA so you can hear about the Trevor Bauer situation.
On Empty the Bench now, an award-winning journalist over at NBC LA, covering all the LA teams, the Dodgers, the Rams, the Lakers. Michael Duarte. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Speaking of empty the bench, like I'm the last guy off the bench ready to come in and pinch hit. So I love the name of your podcast, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
So as somebody who is covering the Dodgers, obviously you've been following and covering this whole Trevor Bauer story. And there was a ruling that came in just the other day about the restraining order, which was obviously denied. A little bit of weird language used when we were looking over the judge's ruling. What did you make of it?
Yeah, it was a very interesting. The whole hearing was interesting. This whole saga beginning at the end of June, when we first got wind of the restraining order ex parte even being filed in court and then granted, which TMZ broke that story originally. It was just shocking because, Trevor Bauer, I think it just pitched like the day before. We had interviewed him. He had asked us, he had asked us why we hadn't asked him about Angel Hernandez catching him behind the plate that game and his balls and strikes in the strike zone. So to suddenly shift that into a potential criminal investigation, into potential sexual assault, into potential rape, into potential other things was just unbelievable. And then the fact that he stayed on the roster and flew with the team to Washington, D.C. before finally getting put on temporary leave by Major League Baseball. Yeah, all of it was just very surreal and bizarre. But to go into the ruling that you spoke of by the judge yesterday, and this is a Superior Court LA judge, lower level, who's dealing with these restraining order cases. Leading into that, Trevor Bauer's team, and it looked like his goal was to try to delay this hearing as long as they could. And I'm not sure if that was to try to just get him to the finish line of the MLB regular season, as far as be on paid leave for the remainder of the way, get your full contract that you're going to get paid anyway without having to pitch the entirety of the second half, and then hope that you can do the hearing after that, then MLB's investigation and the Pasadena Police Department's investigation. And if anything overlaps, or if there's anything, in the testimony that could harm him in any way in these other investigations, that hopefully he had delayed it. But the judge said, no, this is happening. And it was happening last week. There's no more delays. We're doing this now. And so to me, that was a indicator that, okay, she was a little fed up with his team and their tactics. And, that was good news for the accuser in that case. Now, as we go along, the accuser testifies for almost 10 hours over 3 days, long, grueling questions. Sorry about that.
All right.
Long, grueling questions where she gets hammered by both sides, especially Trevor Bauer's attorneys in this case. So, and then Trevor Bauer doesn't have to take the stand at all. He was only going to answer 2 questions: his name and that he plays Major League Baseball as a pitcher. So that wasn't, and then plead the fifth for every other question he would have been asked. So the judge doesn't make him take the stand at all because of that. So everything that is the point I'm getting to, guys, here is that everything was leading, in my opinion, that the restraining order was going to be granted and extended for the full maximum 5 years. And even in the closing arguments, outside of the judge kind of interrupting the accuser's attorney's comments, where she kind of made it more personal, where she started to get into Trevor Bauer's past, where she started to call him a monster and get into those things and stray away from the facts of the case, the facts that they had presented in this hearing on why the restraining order needed to be extended. I was still saying at that time, it looks like the judge is going to extend this. Then we went into the defense's closing arguments. Miss Holly, Trevor Bauer's attorney, Sean Hawley's closing statements, and she was all over the place and veering from personal attacks to like slut shaming, as they say, against the accuser, to the past men she's been in relationships with, like Fernando Tatis and Mike Clevenger, another former Indian teammate of Trevor Bauer's, who's now on the Padres. It was really kind of all over the place, going into her past as an alcoholic, not focusing on the things I thought she should be focusing on, which was, this is a domestic violence restraining order request. In order for that to be granted, you have to establish there's a relationship between Trevor Bauer and the accuser, and you have to prove that she is an imminent threat. Trevor Bauer is an imminent threat to the accuser as we speak, which is why the restraining order would have need to be granted. Those are the 2 points that they can argue and win, but they didn't do it. And they went in this long closing argument that strayed and went everywhere. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're shooting Trevor Bauer's argument in the foot. Then the judge leaves for, it doesn't seem like 5 minutes. It doesn't seem like a couple minutes. And she was probably looking up something, I would imagine, some past case to cite or something. And she starts to come out and starts her statement and her ruling, I guess, by saying that there's enough there that you could reasonably say there was some sort of relationship. Again, leading me to believe she was going to extend this. Then, however, she gets into 2 important parts, which we'll talk about now. One, that the accuser omitted messages in her initial filing. These are the text messages that Sean Hawley and Trevor Bauer's defensive team really attacked the accuser on. That you showed all these text messages that show he did this to you, he was trying to help you and contact you, but you didn't show these other messages where he agreed not to contact you anymore, and he hasn't contacted you in over a month since you filed the restraining order. And so that was a big part of what the judge said. She believed that there was misleading information to why the original temporary restraining order was granted. And that's solely based on her saying that Trevor Bauer in that original filing was calling her incessantly, multiple times a day, every day, was texting her nonstop. And that just wasn't the case by the time she filed this ex parte at the end of June. It was actually, maybe he was doing it right after the incident happened at the end of May, but had not contacted her in over a month by the time this was filed. So the judge really hammered on that point. And then the second point, which I think, crazy to say, Trevor Bauer's team did a good job proving, which is, if Trevor Bauer is violent or only does these things during sex, if he's rough, if he's, participating in BDSM or just rough, violent sex in the bedroom, he is only a threat to her in the bedroom. And if he has not contacted her now in many months and is planning on never seeing her again and never doing anything in the bedroom, then why would you need the restraining order against him? And so that's why the judge ruled to deny the extension. This is for fans out there and your listeners. This does not exonerate Trevor Bauer in any way. This does not mean he is innocent of the crimes that he was being accused of. All this means is that this particular judge did not see him as an immediate threat to her and to have a restraining order for 5 more years against him. She believed that Trevor Bauer would stay away from her, never contact her again, and never embark in a sexual relationship with her again. And that the original restraining order was misleading because he wasn't calling and texting her every day like she made it seem at the time. So that's where that is in the case. But, and I'm sure you'll ask about this next, there is that's not necessarily a legal precedent, but this is the first time a judge, an actual judge, has listened to the facts of the case, has listened to the testimony, and made a ruling. So to me, that is not quite a precedent, but it starts the ball rolling as far as what we could see happen when it comes to the Pasadena police investigation, a potential civil trial, the MLB's potential investigation, and essentially Trevor Bauer's future in baseball.
Funny you should say that, Michael, because that was my next question. Because what specifically, based on everything that we know right now, everything that is basically been based on everything we have right now, what is it that you genuinely believe that the MLB will do in this case? Punitive measures or something else?
Yeah, so this is interesting. I mean, I never really cared about what the ruling was going to be in this restraining order hearing when I was making predictions on previous shows, on television, on radio, even just talking to friends privately about what I think is going to happen. There are people who are like, can Trevor Bauer come back and be on the Dodgers rotation for the playoffs? No, I don't think you're going to see him pitch again this season. And I've been saying that since day one, since the day all this happened. That doesn't mean I don't think he'll ever pitch for the Dodgers again or in baseball again. I just don't think it'll be this season. So that's kind of where we're working from. And that will lead me to what I think MLB is going to do to answer your question, Nick. So the first thing first, this is going to drag out for the most of the season. The fact that this hearing concluded at this time is now going to put a little more pressure on the Pasadena Police Department to conclude their criminal investigation, which has been ongoing since May. So it's been a long time they've been investigating this. To me, this reminds me of the Deshaun Watson situation with the Houston Texans. They're still investigating that. And we now have 22 different women accusing him of anything from sexual harassment to inappropriate touching to assault, different things like that.
Yeah, it's another case that's basically escalated from when it first started.
Yeah, and he's actually still in training camp where, this was the optics that nobody liked. Just the fact that Trevor Bauer got in a plane with the Dodgers. He never took the mound again, but he was with the team, and that made everybody angry. And there was a possibility he would make his next start on the 4th of July in the nation's capital, and that made everybody angry. So, the possibility of Deshaun Watson starting a game for the Texans in a few weeks with this looming over his head is unimaginable. NFL needs to take a page from baseball, and I can't believe I'm saying that because that's usually rarely the case. They need to take a page from baseball and just put him on the commissioner's exempt list while they figure this out and while the investigation occurs. But to get back to where I was, I think this is going to put pressure on the Pasadena police to do a police investigation. My gut tells me they're probably not going to the prosecutor is not going to bring charges against him, which again is just going to lead to people thinking he's innocent here. And criminally speaking, it's going to help him, obviously, but I don't think all this is going to revolve around that one thing the judge talked about, which is what I said as far as setting the base, the formation, right? I don't want to use the word precedent because it's a legal word, but setting the groundwork in this case, where it comes to that little part of consent. And she spoke about it in her ruling, and I see you, Tom, nodding your head, so you remember this. She was saying that when we always talk about rape or sexual assault, when a woman is able to say no and not give her consent. But what if she says yes to some things, meaning sexual intercourse,
and was not expecting that,
rough play, slapping, choking, etc., but then she goes unconscious.
Yeah.
And now while she's unconscious, she's accusing Trevor Bauer of then punching her repeatedly in the face.
Right. That's what I was talking about with the weird ruling, though, because they were using the language of the limits.
Correct. And what they used was an admission of risk, basically assumption of risk, excuse me. That was the word she used. The assumption of risk in this instance is that if you have agreed and consented to having sex with somebody and it's going to be rough, I'm going to be choked, I'm going to be slapped, I'm going to be thrown around a little bit. There's an assumption of risk there that you're going to potentially end up with bruises, cuts, some of the things she ended up with. Now, her point is like, I didn't consent to getting punched in the face and having 2 black eyes. I didn't consent. And this is something I don't think was talked about enough during the hearing or proved, but she's claiming that there was anal sex while she was unconscious. Trevor Bauer's team is saying that's not the case. So that'll be interesting to see if that would come out in a criminal trial or a civil trial, and if she has the medical records to prove that or not. But she's saying what happened while I was unconscious was not consent. And California law, if you are unconscious, you're not able to withdraw your consent.
Yes.
You have to be conscious to do that. That's the law. And that is what is the criminal investigation by the Pasadena Police Department is hinging on. And to me, why it's taking so long is how can we prove that? Because right now, the only two people in the room are him and her. So who knows if she was truly unconscious when these things were happening or not, is him or her, is Trevor or the accuser. And that's going to be very difficult to prove or disprove in a court of law. And what I was told from sources was that, and this was a month ago, when it first started, that the Pasadena Police Department was really, they know those base facts right off the bat. What they were trying to do was dig deeper into her past sexual relationships. The fact that we've uncovered and discovered she was an alcoholic and has these one-offs with baseball athletes in the past. His past previous relationships, like we see this other Ohio restraining order ex parte that was filed in Ohio by another woman that Trevor Bauer was in a relationship with, who she claims he hit her and choked her during sex. So the police are trying to get as much evidence as they can, digging into both people's past here to see if they can develop a pattern that could help prove what we just talked about, that part of consent when she was unconscious. So to me, I don't think there's going to be enough to bring charges against him. So I believe that's going to then lead to the accuser suing him in civil court for financial damages in this. And she should, because that's the next step for her, at least. So that's what I think will happen next. MLB's investigation, I still think they're going to try to punt this as long as they can, waiting for something to happen in the Pasadena Police Department or even a civil case in here. If MLB feels the need to conclude their investigation before these other investigations, which I don't think they really need to at this point, but if they do, my guess, to go now back to your original question, Nick, is that at least a 30-game suspension is looming here. One thing that they can at least go to as a precedent for themselves that was revealed in this hearing is that Trevor Bauer is not denying that he did these things to this woman. He is denying or contesting, I should say, whether or not it was truly consensual, whether or not she had asked or wanted this to happen, and just how severe the injuries actually are, and were they made worse by photos and other people talking about it, medication she was on, something they were claiming might have made the bruising worse, things like that. That should be enough for MLB to say, okay, we know you've done this. We now have this Ohio woman who filed something similar against you. Whether there are criminal charges or not, this is enough for us to suspend you for 30 games, which would be the rest of the regular season and the postseason. And let's see where we're at February spring training of 2021. The bigger question, or 2022, excuse me. The bigger question is going to be, what do the Dodgers end up doing once this is all wrapped up? And that to me is where things get messy.
All right, so that was our interview with Michael Duarte, a journalist, a sports journalist, award-winning sports journalist over at NBC in LA. Covers all the big LA sports teams, Dodgers, the Rams, the Lakers, and that was not actually our full interview. But as you can see,
that was incredible.
He's awesome. He's awesome.
I learned a lot just from watching. I watched the whole thing beforehand, but the reason I stopped there is because I thought that was a key stopping point, right? As you guys were discussing what's going to happen next year. I'm sure if you want to give everybody just a quick preview of what goes on in the other part of the interview.
Yeah, so we talk about basically what this is going to mean for Trevor Bauer, in terms of the rest of, 2021 and beyond. Is he going to opt out? What are the Dodgers going to do? Are they going to try to get out of this? Are they going to have to try to avoid the money? And this was at the end of the interview, but we have always talked about this when situations like this come up in terms of athletes and athletes who are on big money contracts any moral or ethical clauses and what constitutes as a violation that the teams can get out of that contract. So we talk all about the business end and more details on what happened inside that courtroom. As you can see, he was very detailed on what was going on in that courtroom. So I guess I'll just plug Empty the Bench on our YouTube channel on Empty the Bench. That is where you're going to find the full interview. That should be up tomorrow. Again, more and more details, very detailed, very, and it's unprovoked. Like, as you can see, Nick and I didn't even do much of the talking, much of the asking of questions.
Yeah. He did.
No, that was incredible.
It's almost like we were kind of fumbling to ask a question because you don't want to embarrass yourself in front of him, and the other thing is you don't want to, you want to make sure you're bringing up a good point.
No, but you were telling me before we started the episode, that was interesting about the whole being unconscious and consent law in California. I didn't know that was like a real thing. And now he really broke that down. He broke that down in such a way where I was like, wow, like that's a real thing, that if you have consent and then you pass out, that's still technically giving consent.
And it sucks, but again, the law is the law, and there's a lot of misogynist laws in place. But again,
well, I was gonna say it depends. Like it's another one of these things. Like we were talking right before we went on the air here. It's like the recording laws, how we have one party's consent, two party consent. The consent laws for sexual intercourse, vary by state, which I had no idea.
So. Exactly. All right, so you'll catch that whole interview on our YouTube page. It's about a 40-minute interview, so if you really want to get the full details, it'll be up there. All right, so let's move on into big story number 2, or 1B, if you would like to say. And
there's a lot more to talk about, especially when baseball. The top story outside of the Trevor Bauer news this week, Major League Baseball is proposing a $100 million salary floor. Now, we have had many discussions here on Empty the Bench and our old Unspoken podcast about should we, like, we would have days where Nick Morgasen, you would argue for a salary cap. Nick Fodera, you would argue about a floor. So MLB basically is saying, ¿Por qué no las dos? So basically, this proposal from, I'm not sure where it's from. I believe it's from the commissioner.
The pits of hell.
Pits of hell.
No, it came from the commissioner. That's the one.
Commissioner's office. Pits of hell. Same thing. What's the difference?
What's the difference?
Okay, it would basically be both. It would be a $100 million salary floor. So teams would basically everybody in MLB would have to spend at least $100 million on their payroll. But it would come with a catch. The luxury tax threshold. This is that threshold where if you go over it, basically the teams get taxed. They have to pay some money to baseball. That would get moved to $180 million, which is a $30 million drop from where it is now.
So essentially, what this means is all the money that is left over from teams exceeding the luxury tax would go towards those teams that don't have or don't want to spend the $100 million salary floor. So the tax revenues would be funding them. So the Dodgers would be funding the Pirates.
But wait a minute. We already have this with revenue sharing. So basically what we're doing now is we're creating a second revenue sharing model because teams are going to get punished because they're in bigger markets. Wait, and like the Yankees.
How do you think this is going to go over?
I'm just saying, like, it's weird. It's weird. It's like there's a floor and there's a cap, basically, and this little, let's say, not exactly a cap, but it's a threshold. And we've seen MLB owners and general managers not want to exceed this threshold. Look at the Yankees over the last few years. But I'm saying it's like basically they want to take all 30 major league teams and put them in like a vacuum and say,
you're missing one point here. One point we're missing here. The Dodgers are at $290 million in payroll. So according to this rule, they would have to drop, what is it, close to over $100 million.
$100 million.
And how is that fair?
Wait, and that money goes to all the other teams that are at the bottom. And wait, I have one more. Like you said, Tom, I'm giving you credit on this one. The Tampa Bay Rays, which are the Oakland A's that are under. You're telling them now they have to spend to meet it. Now, I do agree with that part of the rule that teams shouldn't, these billionaire owners who freaking put the money in their pocket rather than spending it on players, God forbid, that should be on an MLB roster. I mean, what are we talking about here? Spend the money. Spend it.
This is the problem. And I've seen some dumb ideas bandied about in my time watching baseball. I've seen some real dumb ones, but this has to be up towards the top. I mean, what's next? Are the bats going to be made out of plywood? Why?
I mean, we're already talking about potentially moving the pitcher's mound back. We've already
again, but this is the MLB shooting itself in the foot. This is the MLB creating a problem. If it ain't broke, break it.
Wait, there's another problem with this situation. Guys, isn't there an MLB negotiation that's about to come this coming off season? And now you're throwing I don't
think this is going to go over with them.
You're throwing another log into the proverbial fire at this point where you're saying, you know what? I'm going to take a flamethrower and I'm just going to destroy Major League Baseball by adding another dumb rule into the fold.
This is what I have been talking about. This is something that I have mentioned, before this, and especially in terms of like when the Astros scandal was going on. It's like, so technically when there's a strike, gentlemen, it's what? It's always the owners versus the Players Association. It seems like with Major League Baseball, like in terms of like what's going on with this, and what's going on with like how, the effects of the Astros and Red Sox scandals, it feels more like a four-way matchup because you have players who are mad at their own union. And this ruling, I'm sure you're going to have owners and general managers who are going to be pissed off at the commissioner, who, remember, guys, as a commissioner, who is the commissioner always appointed by?
The owners.
So it seems like basically they're splint off, groups and everything. And it's just, guys, with everything that's going on, I know this isn't a sound on our soundboard, but I feel like this must be.
On strike. We're going on strike.
But we're going on a strike. And
no, I have one more. I have a sound effect I would use for the Players Association and the owners.
Yeah, they are going to be.
Exactly.
Guys, this is 2022 is not starting on time. I'm sorry.
No.
But you know what? I have another one because we haven't played it yet. This is what I think of the negotiations.
Do you really think that the Steinbrenner family, or Hal Steinbrenner, and Magic Johnson, the Henry family, and Artie Moreno, guy owners in major markets, do you really think they're going to, hey, go ahead, I'll take the pay cut? And you know what? All the people that own the Rays, they can just, just take the money. We're not using it.
Yeah, I think that's genius idea.
Can't afford it.
I have one more.
Yeah, genius idea. No, sorry, Nick. Genius idea. Genius.
Genius with a J.
Like we're gonna drop our floor for our threshold for the luxury tax, $30 million in one season. $30 million.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
I mean,
when that happens, monkeys are going to start flying out of my ass.
You know what? Can we just grow? Can we have money trees? Maybe that's the next invention that we're going to make here.
I mean, money seems to grow on trees for these people, but they just don't want to spend it.
Wait, the one thing I want to say here, this is why Mark Cuban never got rejected by Major League Baseball to be an owner, because he wants to spend the money to make the money, and Major League Baseball doesn't work that way.
I was just gonna say, hey, you know what? If this means the Yankees end up spending more and becoming the Yankees of old, I guess, sure.
But you know what? This all goes back to one person, which Nick knows I ranted completely on last week. Rob Manfred. This goes back to Rob Manfred again, because this guy does not know how to run his league.
This man wants philosophy. If it ain't broke, break it.
This man wants to destroy baseball, it seems.
I want to know, and I have the perfect sound effect for this too. When Rob Manfred came to the table with the rest of the commissioner's office, and he put this idea on the table, he took his piece of paper and he went, All right, guys, I have an idea. MLB, let's propose a $100 million salary floor, and let's tax everybody who's spending $180 million or more. What do you think? And I guarantee you, this is what they thought.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God. Stop fucking lying.
It's like what I said at the beginning of this. It feels like what Manfred wants is like all 30 teams like in a vacuum, basically. Okay, you're all on the same level.
This is not the NFL. Major League Baseball is a much different run sport.
I will go one step further. Major League Baseball over the years has proven that it does not matter if you're a big team or a small team. Basically, anybody can win the World Series. We look at 2008 and 2009.
Tampa Bay.
2008, who won the AL pennant? Tampa Bay, one of the lowest payrolls. Who won in 2009? The Yankees, one of the highest payrolls.
But this is a problem, not just in Major League Baseball. If you look at the NBA, the Lakers have one of the higher payrolls in the NBA. Well, now that might be the Nets and a few other teams now. But why do you think the NBA wants the Lakers in every year? They spend the most money. They spend the most money. Major League Baseball, no one gives two shits who makes it.
I'm just saying with MLB, part of the magic is any of these teams can make it. Part of the magic is, it's like it goes back to what we were talking about with the baseballs, and either loading them or densing them. It's like, it doesn't matter. A game that's 12-10 can have the same magic as a 2-1 pitching duel. Everything unique about baseball, it seems like Rob Manfred, he wants to make he doesn't want unique. He wants format. He wants similar.
But why? That makes we've learned over the years, not just in Major League Baseball, but in any sport, when you put a format in, what happens? People get bored.
At the baseball, you're already having a boring problem. Now you're turning off even more people.
Major League Baseball is what I like to call the death of age, where basically 60 years and older are watching Major League Baseball. I read a study that's like the average age watching baseball right now.
And now you're turning those people off by making all these rules and all these, we're going to try to target the younger people. But guess what? You're failing at targeting the younger people. So who's winning?
And I need to credit Nick on something that he said last week when we were talking about the Field of Dreams game. And he was telling me that the tickets were $3,000 a seat for the Field of Dreams game.
But the most tuned in game in like 16 years.
Agreed. But at the same time,
you're supposed to get people to see the majesty with their own eyes, right? Isn't that what they went crazy for?
Well, yeah, but MLB only depends on the freaking TV, I guess, because the family of four can't go to a game.
Jesus Christ.
Right, but I made a point right off of what Nick said. Like, who's the only one that can? What's the only age range or people that can afford $3,000? People who are older,
dentists, lawyers.
But all right, we got to move on here. Speaking of, Nick brought up the Steinbrenners earlier, so I want to talk about ownership in New York.
You mean a different ownership group?
So Steve Cohen goes on Twitter, which, by the way, if you remember, I think it was a few months ago when he decided, bye Twitter, I'm leaving, and then somehow he randomly ends up back on Twitter, and now he's beating the shit out of his team.
This is exactly what we didn't need. A bad New York team with an owner that's got a big mouth and itchy Twitter fingers.
But you know what? Like I saw this comment, and this is all I'm thinking. Like he just blew his team out.
Okay, let's break it down. Context is
so
necessary.
he basically went on Twitter and basically, because the Mets are one of these teams right now in MLB who are just flat out sucking. They are struggling. They have
16 out of 22 losses.
They have fallen out of first place in the NL East. The NL East is a lot more competitive now than it was at a couple of months ago. But the thing about the Mets is he basically was attacking the hitters. It's the same old Mets in that, hey, pitchers like, Stroman and Walker and Thor, hey, and DeGrom, hey, great job on the mound. Unfortunately, you get the L because we couldn't give any run support. We can't make the opportunities when our runners get in scoring position. And he was attacking the team on that. Basically, he was talking about OPS on that tweet, which OPS, pretty important stat, a pretty key stat when determining a team's success. But this is the question: is that maybe this should have been left for the locker room?
No, but I have the tweet. I'm going to read the tweet because the tweet is ridiculous. And by the way, it was seen by a lot of people. It's hard to understand how professional hitters can be this unproductive. The best teams have a more disciplined approach. The slugging and OPS numbers don't lie. Now, when I look at this tweet and he says, it's hard to understand how professional hitters can be this unproductive. Who bought the team? Who spent the money? Who brought these people in?
Steve Cohen.
I'll give you 3 guesses, and the first 2 are wrong.
I mean, come on, Steve. I mean, you're really making a statement when you bought the team. You're responsible for the team.
Again, he is right. But is this something that, maybe you should have called a team meeting in the locker room and not eviscerated them on Twitter for?
I mean, don't get me wrong. They came out next game and they won, I think, 6-2 in extra innings against the Giants. But that's the only win they've had lately.
I actually made a joke yesterday to Michael when we were off the air. Would you tie Steve Cohen down to a chair and rip off his head? It's actually Jeff Wilpon in disguise, like a Scooby-Doo villain. This is what I'm thinking here, because again, the same old man, and you cannot convince me that he's just Jeff Wilpon with bigger pockets. I mean,
Wait a minute.
This is what the results are dictating here.
Wait a minute. I guarantee you this is what Steve Cohen is thinking right now.
RELAX.
Right.
No.
No.
He's hitting the panic button.
No. Believe me, this is nothing if not a panic move. Believe me, you do not go on Twitter and say that unless you are sweating bullets right now. Sweating bullets and pooping bricks.
All right, let's get into the football. Now, it's very fortunate, I guess is the word, that when we had the interview with Michael, basically he brought up the similarities between the Trevor Bauer case and the Deshaun Watson case. So now, reportedly, the FBI was getting involved in the Deshaun Watson case. Now, when this story first broke, I think it was more from a more local or second, it wasn't one of the big name sources, so I was a little skeptical on it. However, it seems more and more being confirmed. Sports Illustrated has confirmed it, and according to these reports, even Deshaun's own representation, Rusty Hardin, is confirming.
Wait a minute. I need to think about this for a second.
FBI, open up!
What did they find is what I want to know.
I mean,
apparently they just talked to Deshaun, and it may not have been about all 22 cases. It may have been about just a couple of them.
He is screwed. Can we just admit it now that he is just screwed?
This case is just going in directions I never thought it would go in.
I mean, can we get Rusty hard off this damn case already? I'm a little tired of it.
Why do I keep hearing his name every time?
Can we tie Rusty hard on and Tony Busby to trees?
I mean, at this point, I'm surprised that the Texans haven't released him.
They can't release him. He's under a massive contract.
I know. I did. Well, thank you for answering my question for me.
Well, time out, because even if he is rostered, as far as I know, we still have the issues between Deshaun and the Texans. So who knows if he's even the starting quarterback week 1, even if he's cleared of all these charges, even if the NFL doesn't put him on an exempt list.
Hey, Nick, you should use that phrase here again. It's a fustercluck.
It is a fustercluck, and all the chickens are coming home to roost, unfortunately.
I mean, the only reaction I can have to this is, what the fuck?
I don't get it.
Man, I just don't understand. Again, this case is just going in directions that I never thought it would go in, and clearly the Texans had a problem. And maybe trading DeAndre Hopkins a couple of years ago wasn't exactly.
He wasn't traded. He was raptured.
Yeah.
He was rescued. He was rescued via helicopter.
No, I'll tell you what they did. That's what they did.
B.O.B., man. B.O.B. All right. Jack Morris, very quickly here. Jack Morris was suspended after making a racial remark regarding Shohei Ohtani. So to break this down, I was going to say, I don't know if those are the right words. So let me break this down a little further. So basically, during the broadcast, I believe it was his broadcast partner, was asking, how they should approach pitching wise, approaching Shohei Ohtani, and he said the words "be very, very careful." Except it came off, he was using a mock Asian accent.
Yeah, let's be very clear here. I don't think he actually said anything derogatory, so to speak.
It was the tone in which he said it.
The context and tone, yes.
And that's the weird thing, because interpretation, and we all know this in this business, interpretation is a hard thing to tell sometimes. But this
one was pretty clear cut.
I was going to say, but I don't know if he was trying to mock Elmer Fudd or something, but it did not sound like Elmer Fudd.
That did not sound like Elmer Fudd. No, believe me, it did not.
And Shohei came out with a response afterwards.
Did he?
I mean,
he did.
He basically said that something about like respecting Jack Morris and like I'm used to it, basically. And I'm like, wait, what?
It's kind of sad that he's used to it.
It's a sad commentary on the state of affairs in this country that Shohei Ohtani, the Japanese superstar, is used to having white people just do that mock Asian accent. What's next? Is he gonna do? Is he gonna do the full slanty eyes bit? Jesus.
I don't know. It's just one of those ridiculous things.
I mean, we saw a controversy like that with the Olympics.
Yeah, but you know what? I guess he just thought he could get away with it. I have no idea.
All right, let's get a little more fervor here with the NFL. A couple more stories here as we wrap things up.
Hey, your favorite owner.
So
context is necessary.
So the
Jon
NFL,
Mara, the NFL is, I think, instituting a 15-yard penalty for what they conceive to be taunting.
They are breaking down their cup. It's like the MLB with the sticky stuff. They're targeting it. They're going down on it.
So if you sack the quarterback and do a dance, like we've been seeing people do that since LT, and apparently they don't want to do that anymore. That's part of the fun.
I mean,
so now I have a question. I got a good question then. So that's the example that the three of us have been harping on in pre-show meetings. But what happens then if you score a touchdown, you spike the ball, and everybody comes together and poses? Shouldn't that then be a 15-yard penalty under their definition?
Probably. By the way, does anyone want to hear from Jon Mara? I have the audio.
Oh God, you're gonna play it anyway, aren't you?
You're gonna play it, yeah. You might as well do it and get it over with.
Just so we have the interpretation of it. But here's Jon Mara on his comments about taunting and how bad it is for the sport.
The taunting emphasis. What were the conversations about that among you guys?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we discuss every year in the competition committee. We get kind of sick and tired of the taunting that does go on from time to time on the field. We've tried to balance the sportsmanship with allowing the players to have fun, and there's always a fine line. But none of us like to see that, and it's just a question of whether you can have rules that can be enforced without taking the fun out of the game too. But nobody wants to see a player taunting another player. I know I certainly don't, and I think the rest of the members of the competition committee feel the same way too.
Go ahead.
And so for more further context, so Jon Mara, the owner of New York Giants, is part of that committee who basically structures the rules and everything. And I do agree with him that sometimes there is a fine line that is needed between celebration and taunting. However, the whole issue that I have is that basically the NFL, in terms of like their fine lines and everything, they get it wrong. The fine lines are sometimes basically a little too, they're a little too restrained. Like I just said, basically, if they're gonna penalize players for sacking the quarterback, but those touchdown celebrations aren't, and I don't want those touchdown celebrations to be penalized because some of that is funny.
Do we have to say this again? Because I know we're going to say it anyway. NFL, no fun league.
And it's just more and more and more no fun.
What bothers me the most is Jon Mara likes to pretend that the Giants are the exemplar of classy in the NFL. But
May I go back to the Eli Manning benching debacle of 17?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And we're not like those uncultured Jets. It's like, which, no offense, Nick.
Hey, Mara. No, I'll say that. Hey, Mara, How about you focus on the freaking Giants actually doing something this season?
How about you win a friggin' game first?
How about you work on, I don't know, controlling your players now that we've had the second fight in this freaking off season?
You know what? Let's just listen to Aaron Rodgers because he'll tell us how to handle it.
RELAX.
Yeah, just relax. It'll pass.
All right, guys. NFL season is coming up. Let's talk about the AFC for a little bit. We got a little less than 10 minutes here. So let's talk about the AFC, guys. So what do you think are some of the bigger storylines, the best and worst teams? I think one of the biggest storylines, obviously, we've discussed the Deshaun Watson case over in Houston.
That's a big case. Also, the New England Patriots quarterback situation. I think that's a big story.
Definitely. Whether we're going to see Mac Jones this year or not.
How's Zach Wilson over with your guys, the Jets? Nick Morgasen, how's he going to perform?
What are the Chiefs going to do? And honestly, until I see otherwise, it's the Chiefs' division. It's the Chiefs' division to win.
I think the AFC North is going to be a division to watch because you have the Browns looking dangerous. Joe Burrow's back, and he's got another weapon because obviously they drafted T. Higgins last year. Tyler Boyd still abound, and now they got Jamar Chase. That's going to be a really interesting unit.
That's a complete division for the first time in years, the AFC North. Even the Bengals are going to be halfway decent.
I mean, we always say that about the Bengals, but they always end up...
They bungle.
No, but they actually
They don't have 500 records anymore, so let's bet on 7-10.
No, but they actually have a decent quarterback for a change, hopefully. But just to go back for a second, I think we're going to end up with a Sam Darnold situation with the Jets again. That's just my prediction.
That's the other thing. And now that we're in the Zach Wilson era now, so I guess he's the guy. So what's he got? I mean, is it going to be like a Daniel Jones situation where he shows some promise, but you're not exactly...
Well, we'll get into Danny Jones next week on episode 100.
We'll get into that next week. But still...
Oh, man. I can't wait for that.
Is he gonna start coming? Is he gonna come out of the gate gunslinging, or what? I mean, what else is there? But
I'm hoping, guys, in terms of rookies that are starting their sophomore season, Justin Herbert over in LA with the Chargers. I kind of hoping that he has another big season again. He came out strong in his rookie campaign. I hope he doesn't have a sophomore slump.
Absolutely, and
I think. Good.
He brought the Chargers back from I don't want to say mediocrity of the Philip Rivers because he was definitely
there's hope. There's hope.
But they choke in the playoffs.
No hope.
There's
hope. Hope for Herbert.
But I was going to say also, I think we should watch the Colts situation also with Carson Wentz.
It goes back to, I mean, I don't understand how he's going to start week 1 after those initial reports, but the AFC South, and let's just pick some division winners here. The AFC South, it's like what I said. You got you got the Titans, who have been running the division the last couple of years under Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill's leadership on the field. You got the Jaguars, who've got all this new young talent, including Lawrence and Etienne, and are hopefully going to making their way back. And then you got the Texans and Colts, who look like they're going to be battling for the number 1 pick overall in the draft. So go ahead. No, it's going to be the Titans. It's going to be the Titans.
Yeah, it's going to be the Titans until I see otherwise.
Go ahead. I was just going to say that basically the AFC South might be competing with the NFC East for worst division in football.
Oh yeah,
that's saying something.
But like I said, I think the Titans, like you said, the Titans are going to win, and I actually think the Jaguars are going to compete for a change with Trevor Lawrence. I think that's going to be interesting. Well, they're still dealing with the PR nightmare of Tim Tebow, which we ran out of time for, which we couldn't even get to. But just looking at some of the other divisions, the Chiefs are going to run away. We know that already.
Yeah.
The AFC North is the division to watch. I think between the Steelers and the Browns for sure, and then to go back,
Ravens and Bengals. That's anybody's division. That could be a division where one team is the division winner, and the 2 other teams are actually there's 3 wild card spots, so you could see 2 teams, maybe even all of them, getting in the wild card.
Wait a minute, so we will have a 10-win team that's actually not sitting home for a change?
Hopefully. The AFC East, that's the Bills division. Unless the Dolphins can show some improvements. I think Tua and his sophomore season's another storyline to watch out for. Actually, we talked about the AFC West. We're basically writing that off. One of the key situation storyline over there, the quarterback battle, Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock.
By the way, I wouldn't sleep on the Patriots. I think the Patriots are going to come back
Well,
out.
now that they have all their defensive weapons back after most of them opted out of the 2020 season, that's it. How is that defense going to look? And, combined with whatever's going to happen with Cam Newton and Mac Jones, Patriots could be on a comeback season, but we don't know. Again, the AFC could be very competitive for those wild card spots when you consider the AFC North, when you consider maybe Herbert and the Chargers, and what could happen with the Jaguars and their young team.
Right.
Right.
But are we done or do we have more left?
I think we're done because we have to add something.
Well, yeah, and I also have a little. I was talking to Nick behind the scenes, and I made a little something for the end of the episode too. And don't look at the bottom yet because it's for the end of the episode. I'm just putting it there. But we'll get to that in a second. But let's make some announcements. Go ahead, start, Tom.
Okay, everybody, this is. If you haven't followed our social media or you've just been sleeping under a rock, this is our last episode on Twitch. It's been fun being on Twitch, but we feel like we could do more with a new home. So we will be moving to YouTube starting next weekend for episode number 100. It's really funny how we reached 100 episodes, just over 100 episodes with Unspoken. Now we've got 100 here on Empty the Bench. Now, what's going on in terms of the time slot and everything, I actually have to press pause on next weekend. I don't know what is going on. I can't say for certain that we're going to have a show next Saturday. Unfortunately, to admit something on the air, I lost a very dear friend of mine to cancer this couple of days ago. And the services will be next Saturday. So obviously, I can't miss episode 100, so we don't have any details on when we're going to do episode 100. We'll get you those as soon as possible, as well as the interview with Michael in full. Again, for both of those things, check our social medias, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at ETB Sports, and you see our social media scrolling across the bottom. So Twitch, thank you so much for being a home for the last 4 months or so, and looking forward to YouTube, and we could be expanding very soon, so...
We have a new show. We have 2 new shows coming. Plus, we're working on, we could just say, because it's going to happen in the next episode anyway. We're going to be doing something called ETB Sports Minutes. They're going to be all week except for Friday, because that's when we put up our promo teasers for the next episode. So you're going to hear 2 updates from each of us over 6 days, just so we can do a little more content. And just to be honest, because this is how it works. The social media algorithms, you need more content. So you'll
be seeing us pumping out contents like the Yankees. Hopefully, will keep pumping out wins and hits.
We're essentially a baked good factory here.
But
our goods may not be as tasty.
But I
don't know. I don't know. Have you had Funny Bones?
Well, let me just say one thing before we run out of time. We do have a new UFC, MMA, WWE show. I'm not going to say what the name is yet, but we're expanding to a podcast.
We will reveal those details later.
But now to the surprise part of this thing. I was working on something before the show. I called Nick just to make sure it was okay. Right, Nick? Just so you know.
Oh, he doesn't know, does he?
No.
This is a surprise. I did this on purpose so he wouldn't know.
We're running out of time here, guys.
All right, so this is the end of the show. So the thing that's in blue is going to be the end, not the Empty the Bench logo this week.
That's very fine. Okay. So for Nick Fodera, Nick Morgasen, I'm Tom Albano. We'll see you next week over on YouTube for episode 100 of Empty the Bench, gentlemen. I cannot wait. We'll give you all the details for broadcasts on our social media, but until then, take care, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.